to EdTalks Spotlight. I'm your host, Inna Horvath, a learning strategist at Elai, and today I'm thrilled to explore the world of AI in education with two leading experts from Carnegie Learning. We have Dr. Steve Ritter, its founder and chief scientist behind the groundbreaking MATHia system and a pioneer in AI-powered education. Joining him today is Unekwu-Ojo Shaibu, a learning engineering product manager who drives the production of learning features, testing capabilities, and data collection mechanisms. So stay tuned as we dive into how these advancements are transforming the future of education. Hi, Unekwu. Hello, Dr. Steve Ritter.
Good morning or afternoon for you.
Good sunny morning, I guess. Nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we usually start our podcast episodes with rapid fire questions. These are the same set of questions that we ask each and every speaker of ours, and we summarize the replies by the end of the season. So what book or a resource can you recommend on L&D or educational topic?
One is Justin Reich's book, Failure to Disrupt, which is really kind of about how educational technology hasn't always fulfilled its promise practically in schools, and what EdTech creators need to do in order to kind of have more impact on school processes. And then I'll also mention Jim Cadell's Learning Engineering Toolkit, which is a great resource for particularly technical people who are working in educational technology, and particularly in the areas of educational technology based on learning science or learning engineering.
Sounds wonderful. Unekwu, what's your suggestion?
Awesome. Yeah, so I think I'd actually recommend to Steve's first book, Failure to Disrupt. It's a really, really good book. And I got to learn a little bit more about like even the work Carnegie Learning was doing, and likewise Steve Ritter as well. So it's a really great resource for learning engineering and things like that. Another book that I'll recommend is How We Learn. It's called How We Learn: The New Science of Education and the Brain by Dahein Stanislas. I hope I pronounced his name right. But it pretty much examines learning from a first principle neuroscience perspective, just like exploring questions like what exactly is learning. I know sometimes we do that every day and it looks like an easy thing to, define, but I think there it just gives you like very solid definitions that could be applied to, primates, AI, humans, etc. And I think one thing that I also like about the book is that it discusses like 4 pillars of learning, like active engagement, which has to do with like curiosity, attention, error feedback, consolidation, like explores these 4 pillars, and then shows you how, using them while you're teaching really enhances the learning process. So that's one book that I'll recommend. Another one would be E-Learnings and the Science of Instruction by Clark and Mayer. So like talks about like what it looks like to learn, online, and designing like effective solutions for learning on those platforms. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the great recommendations. So the next question is also connected to recommendations. So who do you suggest to follow and invite to this podcast from L&D or educational experts?
Couple people that I would recommend. I think Dr. Ritter, you might actually take these people too as well. But I'll say Caitlin Mills. So we've done some work with Caitlin on just learning engagement. So if you wanted to learn a little bit more about, engagement, especially with, AI avatars, etc., I think Caitlin would be someone who does that. She's a researcher out of the University of Minnesota. And a couple of other people at, our Levy or Schmidt Futures. Right now, I think they're called Renaissance Philanthropy. People like Kumar Garg, these are like exceptional like product program managers within the EdTech space that could really talk about, programs within that space, and then how they have been designed to, improve learning outcomes for students. But yeah, pass it over to Dr. Ritter to that.
Yeah, I'd add Dan Jarrett and Truman Liu, who are actually at Digital Harbor Foundation now. Thomas Christie, who we've also worked with, is also at Digital Harbor. Ken Cadinger at Carnegie Mellon, if you haven't talked to him, has a long history in cognitive psychology and educational technology. Ryan Baker has done a huge amount of educational technology, and we've particularly worked with him on systems that try and detect student affect. He's also worked with Caitlin Mills as well, as Unekwu mentioned. So a lot of really good people out there to talk to.
Yeah, brilliant list. So the next question, could you share a memorable failure or a setback in your educational journey, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think, Steve, you want to go first?
I was gonna say I have so many stories. I'll say one of my favorite, when we were first building Cognitive Tutor, which is the technology that we now use in MATHia. God, this was like 25 years ago. One of the primary investigators was Al Corbett at Carnegie Mellon. So this was before we started the company. And, you know, we had started field testing, and it came back and said what we considered the classic line, which was neither the software nor the students performed as expected. And that basically has been our experience throughout. And I think actually that's in some ways a big part of our success is that you have to, like, I feel like one of the most important things you learn in graduate school is how little you know, and how things don't always work out the way you expect, and you have to be open to that. And so the idea that you go into a field test or an experiment without the expectation that it's going to turn out positively all the time, you need to expect that and respond to that. And at Carnegie Learning, we embody this into we actually give out an award at our quarterly meeting every quarter called the First Pancake Award. And this also, I think, came from graduate school. I'm not sure who made it up, but the idea is the first time you make a pancake, it's never right. The pan's too hot or too cold, and it doesn't quite work out, but you learn from you learn what the temperature is. And so the second and third ones are better, right? So we try and reward people for taking risks and taking chances, even if it doesn't work out.
That sounds like such a brilliant initiative, and the title is absolutely perfect to the idea. I'm loving it.
I don't always know cross-culturally how that travels, but
yeah, Unekwu, what's your story?
Yeah, so actually this was a couple years back. I was doing like an internship at my university, and one of the challenges that we had at the time was just decreasing retention rates in STEM programs. And so we were tasked with, finding a solution to solve this, myself and other interns. A side story here is, prior to that, I was a math tutor. And I remember one day I was teaching a student in a math learning center, and then I asked the question, if 2x equals 360, what's x? And he was a little hesitant to answer the question, but I just felt like for some reason he knew it, right? So I asked him, I saw he was wearing Jordans, and so I reframed the question to Jordans. And so I said, if you go to the store, you get 2 Jordans for $360, what's the cost of 1 Jordan? He said it's $180. And then I said, I asked you the same thing. For me that was like a eureka moment, because it made me understand that teaching becomes very effective when it incorporates like people's lived context. So moving back to the internship, myself and the other interns were doing a lot of, research, brainstorming solutions, and then designing mock-ups for the solutions that we found at the time. However, we were very, very close to the end of the internship. I realized, or that story pretty much came back to me, where it was, that it sort of occurred to me that we hadn't really designed solutions around students' pain points. We hadn't really understood their pain points to design the solution. We sort of like went ahead to sort of like design a couple of solutions. And so as a result, I, just pivoted my strategy, went to develop like a strategy instead to collect students' insights and then incorporate data-driven approaches to, addressing their challenges. And I think for me, that was key and sort of like kicked up my interest in the whole learning engineering field. So yeah, that's something that, sort of happened at that point. I wasn't able to, finish it because it was always almost close to the internship. But at the same time, I was able to, develop that strategy, and then it built my interest in the field of learning engineering.
Yeah. Thanks for being candid. So next question is, what question must be asked on a job interview for L&D specialist or educator in general?
I ask actually the question that you just asked about what's one of your biggest failures. But I ask that in part to get at, like, what I really want to understand is what they know and believe about learning. And so often I'll ask, like, what do you think is the biggest barrier to students learning better? And so which gets at that kind of pedagogical approach without necessarily being too academic about it. So like what Unekwu just talked about sort of like getting this insight that if you change something from an abstract math problem to something concrete that students can relate to, that actually changes the way that they think and their engagement and their ability to solve problems, which I think is an important insight that's interesting to understand, how crucial that is to your pedagogy or how you think about constructing educational experiences.
Yeah, and Unekwu, what's your question?
Sort of similar. It's pretty much like, how do you use data and analytics to inform the design and improvement of learning products? It's pretty much they're just trying to get at, how you actually understand like user pain points, how you're able to incorporate either qualitative, quantitative, insights or data to make the decisions to build a product, and then also how you're able to evaluate impact of the product on learning outcomes. I think it's sort of like that robust way of thinking about improving student outcomes. I think that's the essence of the question.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. Data is something that we all should implement more, right? So, and last but not the least, if you had to give one brief piece of advice to someone who is just starting their career in L&D or education, what would that be?
I would say balance your education. Understand learning science and statistics in addition to technology. If you come from a technology area, focus on learning science. If you come from a learning science area, focus on statistics and technology, and get that balance, because it's really hard you at least need to have some familiarity with all those fields in order to succeed. I think it's really hard to be too much of a specialist.
Sounds brilliant. And Unekwu?
I really like that advice. And, I think for me, it's really finding an expert in the field and then asking them a ton of questions. So for personally, I just never stop asking questions. And the idea is just to update my mental model to learn how like experts think in the field. And then also making recommendations when you have one. Like, it can be tempting to stay in the learning space, but if there's a good recommendation, you read something online, feel free to do that. And you could get corrected, or it could sort of like, fly to be something big. So, yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you for this invaluable insights, and I'm pretty sure that our listeners would appreciate them. But currently, we are heading towards our main topic of discussion, which is, of course, AI in education. And while I was getting to know Carnegie Learning and its initiatives, of course, the most striking fact was that you recognized the potential of AI 25 years ago. So my very first and logical question would be for you, Dr. Ritter, about what led you to understand that there is the future behind that, and how do you see the prospects in the? Yeah, I'm just curious about your journey in general with AI.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to go to grad school at Carnegie Mellon University, and I say lucky because I'm not sure, at the time I really appreciated that, but when I was there, Herb Simon and Al Newell, who were two of the kind of founders of artificial intelligence back in the 1950s, were still active at Carnegie Mellon, and had this view which was very common at the time and before that, what artificial intelligence was about was understanding people. So when AI started, it sort of had this dual mission of making computers smart, but also understanding like what intelligence was. And the idea was, if you want to make computers smart, you need to study how humans think, because that's the way you're going to make computers smart. And you see it in their early work about playing chess and problem solving and things that folks like Herb Simon and Al Newell did. But what happened was computers got a lot faster, and with a lot more memory, and because of those characteristics, they had different constraints on them than humans did. And the way AI evolved was, pretty soon, starting probably in the 80s and 90s, chess programs stopped paying attention to what chess masters did when they were playing chess and started doing things that computers were really good at, like processing things really quickly and remembering a whole lot of different things. And eventually, they got better than humans. So they got better at playing chess, but not because they played chess the way that people did, but because they were able to process a whole lot of more information than any person could. And I think you see that in the generative AI models now. They're very smart. They're able to do a lot of things, but the way that they do things is different in many ways than what humans do. And I think in education, to me, one of the most interesting things is maybe more than any other kind of use of AI, in education, we have to focus on how people think, because the whole purpose is to help students understand things. And so having that kind of human insight into what a student is struggling with, or the kinds of things that you can say to a student, or activities you can give to a student to help them advance their state of knowledge, is that kind of insight that I don't think AI naturally has. Doesn't mean it couldn't be trained to do it, but it's not the same as a person who sort of remembers, oh yeah, when I was learning that, I was confused about this. Let me focus on that.
Sounds very interesting. And how do you overcome these setbacks, like these specifics of AI in your activity, in particular in your products?
Well, I think it's a lot about paying close attention to what students actually do. So we have from the beginning, in part because so I was in cognitive psychology. We, in some sense, created Cognitive Tutor both as an instructional system, but also as a system, again, to kind of understand how people were thinking, how students were thinking as they solved math problems. And because of that, we always recorded careful data about everything that students were doing. And our job was to understand that data. So we took the position that if we could predict what students were going to do before they did it, first of all, we could help with instruction because we understood, what students were doing and why they were doing it. And so could work on instructional processes and feedback that would help them evolve in their understanding. But also what it left is a model where we could discover where we were wrong. So if you're making predictions about what students are going to do every time they solve problems, and those predictions are wrong, well, your model is wrong. And so we sort of almost accidentally built a model of improvement into our software from the beginning.
And so I'm very curious about the timeline. You mentioned 25 years ago, and I'm 27. So I must ask that 25 years ago, AI had looked totally different than it does now. And now the technologies are emerging so much faster than ever before. So I'm curious to ask about the progress that AI made for these 25 years. That what was the initial product? What is it now? And how do you foresee the future?
Yeah, great question. So certainly, like the AI that we were using 25 years ago was very much kind of symbolic AI, more like expert systems. So the idea is to kind of encode the way students are thinking in a model that expresses the particular kind of cognitive steps that students take as they're progressing towards a solution. That's still very valid, but layered on top of it, the statistical AI, and including generative AI and other machine learning techniques that have evolved over the years, we use to build content for students, for example. So generative AI in particular, the example that Unekwu gave earlier about creating an example that the student can relate to. That's the kind of thing that generative AI is really good at, whereas we're very optimistic that we can use generative AI for that kind of process. And then we're using a lot of statistical AI, machine learning to make predictions, some of these predictions about what students are going to do next, group predictions about classrooms and what educational experiences would best benefit students, things like that.
Yeah, we will discuss surely generative AI a little bit later in our conversation, but I'm curious, how do you so there is a lot of discussion right now if GenAI is the top of what AI does, because we can see a lot of tools, a lot of investments into that area. How do you see the next couple of years? What's the main focus of improvements in AI? So what will be emerging?
I'd say one thing is there's a lot of, it's a very sort of uncertain time, in a sense, of understanding whether we've sort of hit a plateau with generative AI or whether they're gonna advance more. And there's a big debate about whether the current approaches to generative AI can do things like logic. So mathematics, for example, has been a persistent problem for generative AI. I sort of tend to think that what we're going to end up with is some sort of hybrid models where there's more kind of symbolic AI combined with the statistical generative AI, which is what's going to get us past that. And I think it's very similar to some of the things we see in cognition. So Dan Kahneman, another great book, Thinking Fast and Slow. If you haven't read that one, behavioral economist who kind of comes out of the psychology literature, but he talks about fast and slow processes. And fast processes are more like, your gut feelings, your intuitions, the things that come really quickly. And slow processes are more kind of logical reasoning that often you need to inhibit your fast response in order to kind of let the slow response percolate, because it takes more time. And I feel like generative AI is like that. It's giving the fast responses. And what it needs is a little bit of like executive function, the equivalent of executive function, to kind of like look at those fast responses and decide, like, is that something I really want to put out in the world, or do I want to slow down and think about this in a different way and sort of use more kind of logic and these slow processes to kind of check my answer?
Absolutely.
So that's the way I think it's going to evolve. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it also kind of circles back to the point that you made, that AI started to focus less on the human and more on the machines. So this is the picture that we might be seeing right now. And the next, I would love to explore MATHia product.
MATHia really is the evolution of the approach that we started 25 years ago. And the idea is to give students problems to solve and then watch what they do while they're solving those problems. And the job of the AI is really to understand the strategies and approaches that students are taking so that you can support students in that approach, and to also understand, like, as students are solving problems, what that tells us about what students know and don't know, so that we can select activities that'll help students work on the things that they still need to learn and emphasize less the things that they've already learned and mastered. And I think, behind that are two aspects of, like I said, about understanding the pedagogy of learning. One is leaving students open to understanding things in their own terms, which is the basis of understanding the student strategies, is kind of a basis of like understanding that knowledge builds on prior knowledge. And so you always want to kind of let the students display what they already know and build on that, as opposed to, I always feel like the worst experience you could ever have in school is when you tell your teacher, oh, I think about things this way. And the teacher just says, no, in this class, we do it this way. Right. And it's just terrible for students, because it's essentially telling them, like, you don't belong here, and I don't really care how you think about things, just conform to the way we standard do it. So that's always been kind of part of our philosophy. And then I think the second part is practice. So when I say like thinking about what activities are appropriate, just like a good coach, one of the things a coach does is look at an athlete, understand what they're doing well, and then focus on, okay, in tennis or something, you got to work on your backhand, right? And just really practice that, and focusing on that, the specific aspects that you need to practice is really important. And so what MATHia does is pull that all together in a problem-solving system where we give students problems to solve, understand their approaches to problem solving, and provide them enough practice on the skills that they need to learn that they master. We use a mastery learning approach to make sure they master the prerequisites before they move on, but then also providing them consistent and appropriate feedback and support as they go through problem solving. And I'll say, like, we've now been working to pass it to Unekwu on a product called MATHstream, which is very video based. So Unekwu, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So like Dr. Ritter mentioned, so we use MATHstream is one of our newer products, and it's a video-based learning platform. It's actually like an adaptive and interactive math video streaming program made for middle school and then high school students, primarily used for students who might be, introduced to a specific concept for the first time, or students who need to be re-engaged on a specific lesson. So you introduce a MATHstream to them, and like every MATHstream lesson is taught by a math streamer. It's our term for a math influencer who creates engaging content that breaks down, concepts for students to learn easily. And they do this in a very fun, gamified environment to motivate students to learn new skills and then to outperform themselves. And so you think of the case where, a student moves into, actually just taking a step back, how MATHstream it works is that it's composed of a stream, and a stream is composed of two pieces. It's a video segment and then an assessment segment. The video segments focuses on that's where students are taught lessons. And then the assessment segments are like assessments to either help solidify the learning process or to demonstrate what the students have learned in a previous video segment. So these two pieces are called streams. And so in the sort of like the video portion, that's where you see like the teachers, the dynamic teachers. They're really fun, encouraging influencers who are passionate about teaching math. And then they teach these individuals in pedagogically sound ways. And then while students are watching these videos, think about something like how YouTube, you watch a video, you go into an ad. In MATHstream, you watch a video and then you move into a formative assessment. And there, like you're able to take that formative assessment. If it's correct, you get coins, and then you move into the next video segment. If it's incorrect, you move into an adaptive segment. An adaptive segment is really like a video segment, a shorter video segment that addresses the misconception in the assessment that you just had previously. And so once the student is done with that adaptive segment, they take another quiz and then they move into a video segment. So you can think of this ecosystem as an interaction between learning and then assessing yourself, all done in a gamified environment. So that's a little bit about MATHstream.
Sounds brilliant, and I'm pretty sure that most of our listeners, well, just listening to description, have one thought in mind. I wish I had this when I was a child. Maybe I would have loved math more than it was in the reality, because this is something which is really inspiring. I'm curious what was the feedback I'm pretty sure it was more than positive, but if there are any interesting findings that you have found out after implementing it to learners. So what was the results of not just learners, but teachers? What do they say?
MATHstream is the newer product, and I think it has been getting a very, very positive reaction. One of the things that we've been really interested in is we're trying to create an environment where the students kind of pick an influencer where they're really inspired by them in some ways, or different people have different reactions to. We have a range of these influencers, and people just kind of, like, kids relate to one or the other. And so thinking about like, what's really driving that? So it's really getting at this kind of engagement piece beyond the actual instructional content. And we've been working to kind of understand the power of the instructional content. How do we improve that? Like, what's the best way to explain something? But also, who's best positioned to carry that message for an individual student, and how does that vary across students? So that's been a big focus of the engagement work right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, just to add to that point, it's really been around, we've got a lot of feedback from students around the engagement piece. That's like the gamified experience. They really enjoy the fact that, you can answer a question and you're not just like being taught in a way that's pedagogically sound, but you're also sort of having like a motivating experience, right? So when you get a question, it sort of encourages you. And then even if you do not get the question right, there's also that encouragement piece as well. And the idea for you is to learn and actually like build your skills essentially while you're learning. So a lot of students actually do like the gamified experience, and then they connect likewise with the influencers as well. So these people are really passionate about what they do, and they really know how to break down these the concepts in ways that students are able to understand. Really, really great guys. I remember I was listening to one of them teach a concept recently, and I was like, if I had understood, or if I had this man teach me while I was in primary school or something, I would have gotten this topic faster at the time. So they're just really, interesting, influencers that are passionate about what they do. And so that engagement piece is sort of like key for them.
Sounds fascinating. And just moving on to the accessibility topic is something that I also wanted to cover in, quite briefly, but it's impossible to mention AI and not to talk about accessibility, because this is what enables it in 2024, like probably no time before. You also, Unekwu, you've got the passion for providing the education for low-income students. So, and these kind of projects and platforms, they enable these opportunities. So, the floor is yours.
So I think on accessibility, one of the things that we've been able to do with MATHstream is really just thinking about accessibility from the start. Or when we are developing products, or when we're developing features, we want to think about the sort of personas that we developed. So I think taking a step back there, I remember sort of even before, while I joined Carnegie Learning, one of my first projects was actually to define, the personas with disabilities that we want to, start working with, and then how we would sort of design strategies or solutions around incorporating accessibility with these individuals. Our color contrast, the application, right? Do we have alt text on images? Our screen, can students access screen readers in a way that is logical? Does the process go right, etc.? Like, these things were actually considered, and the things that we still continue to incorporate, as we design for accessibility. There are also other things that, Dr. Ritter might talk a little bit about, how we use like AI for accessibility. Other things that we focus on is also designing for low-income students. So whenever we're designing our solutions, we want to make sure that they're affordable for these individuals, people who may be coming from low-income backgrounds, providing scholarship opportunities, discounts, etc., for students in these districts. So that's those are a couple of things that we're doing. But I'll pass it over to Steve to talk a little bit more about that piece.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, one of the most promising areas for AI and accessibility, I think, is around language. So you often think of math as not involving language, but in fact, because of understandings about pedagogy and how important it is to give students concrete real-world examples that they're applying math to, which means word problems traditionally. And so language comes up a lot in math, and the ability of AI to translate, to provide students with language supports, both in text and in video, is a huge advance in current AI. We currently have a grant from the U.S. Department of Education working with CAST Center for Assistive Special Technology in Boston, which is really focused on making word problems more accessible for students with reading difficulties, which includes the large number of students in U.S. schools who are English language learners. Their native language is not English, as well as students who, for other reasons, have reading difficulties. And one of the things we've been doing is just analyzing the problem of what makes a word problem easier or harder for students to decode and understand. And surprisingly, there's not a lot of work in the context of word problems and understanding very specifically how to write word problems in a way that students can better understand. But we've had great success with that in developing a style guide that was able to have us write word problems that students with reading difficulties were able to solve in 30% less time and with better performance on the math. So it really sort of points out how, for many students, the language is a barrier to them kind of understanding and expressing their abilities in math. So that's been a huge success. And now we're training AI models to understand those aspects of language so that the AI can help us rewrite mathematics content to be more accessible to these students.
That sounds like a fantastic initiative, and I'm talking from my personal experience. Of course, I'm working with the Ukrainian refugees, so I do know what a challenge it is and what accessible learning means the world for children. We've met through Elai, of course, and Elai.io is the AI video generation company, and I'd love to hear your insights on how you are utilizing the tool for your educational initiatives.
Yeah. So yeah, I could talk a little bit about this too as well. In short, we use Elai in our product MATHstream, like I spoke about, to create instructional content powered by video generative AI. And the goal is to deliver short lessons. That's lessons on the adaptive segments. Our goal here is to really learn about the impact of this technology on student learning outcomes. So on things like performance and then engagement. And so I think just to take a little step back again, if you remember, I spoke about the adaptive segment, which is a short video segment taught by the math influencer, and it helps the students to understand mistakes that they've made on formative assessments when they answer incorrectly. And so what we use Elai for here is to create AI avatars, particularly of non-human characters. So we have a MATHscot. It's like a robot called Tutorbot. And so we use Elai to animate Tutorbot to provide, dynamic AI content, or rather content driven by these AI avatars. And like I mentioned, our goal is to test how effective they are in delivering, instructional content. So it's the goal, I think, thinking about how it plays in the bigger ecosystems, that we want to really understand, what the role of these agents would be down the line. Could they act as instructors? Could they act as co-learners? Should they intervene on specific math topics? Or could they be used to motivate students during their learning journey? These are sort of questions that we're exploring as we move forward.
This really expands the amount of personalization that we can do for students. So we calculated last year in MATHia, we gave students 3.1 million unique feedback messages, but all of those were text. So MATHia tries, again, to understand how students are solving problems and give feedback that's problem specific and student specific. So that results in those 3.1 million feedback messages. You couldn't imagine 5 years ago, giving that feedback as videos, as having this influencer actually speak directly to you as a student and recognize like, oh, you multiplied by 3 instead of divided by 3, like using your name, talking about the specific thing that you did. So we're getting to the point where you can imagine having that kind of like truly personalized interaction in a video mode.
Yeah, well, actually, Elai is a platform focusing on educational videos. But we usually do have clients from corporate world, and the feedback is always from adults. So I'm very curious to know what was the reaction? How do children react to AI generated content? Because at times you can tell the difference, at times you can't.
Yeah. So when we started up conducting tests, which was like a year ago, we started off with like usability test while the technology was still new and of lower quality. And we noticed that students at the time didn't trust the AI characters, but they trusted the information that the AI characters did provide. However, as the quality improved and we started introducing the characters more clearly as digital characters, they started to trust the AI agents more. And fast forward to where we are right now, it has been amazing to see how the technology has just advanced in a year. And our research shows now that AI avatars perform as effectively as human video tutors do in teaching and then engaging students digitally. And again, these are like small scale tests, and we look forward to maybe coming back here to speak a little bit about what we learn when we have more large scale tests, if that makes sense. A couple of other things is that we hypothesize that allowing students to customize their AI agents would boost engagement. And when we did this, we actually tested the hypothesis, and then results indicate that factors like audio, tone, speed, personality, were they upbeat, were they calm, etc. These were more important than things like likeness, the age, or gender of avatar. For TutorBot specifically, one of our tests showed that the engagement was higher with TutorBot, but students had a preference for human tutors. I think in summary, we found that using these AI characters is like a cost-effective way to test and then improve instructional design.
What advice would you give to other educational institutions considering AI-generated content?
So here I would say be clear on the hypothesis and then a problem to solve. I think it's important to take care that you're not incorporating artificial intelligence into your product just because it's trendy or it's sparkly, but you're using it to solve specific problems. I think Dr. Ritter has been able to just really expound on like the problems to solve, especially within the edtech space. And so really understanding those problems and finding out ways to leverage artificial intelligence to solve the problems would be one of the sort of key advice that I would give. Another one is just choosing the right AI tool. So just evaluating the various AI tools for, features that would enhance or help you confirm your hypothesis, or pretty much help you test your hypothesis rather. So for instance, for Elai, we wanted to test the impact of non-human characters as well as human characters. And so we used Elai. Elai was the only company that was able to provide that service for us. And so we're able to get that with AI. So choosing the right AI tools is one of them. And then also conducting like small scale control tests and, to understand, what the feedback is from the market and pretty much iterating based on the insights that you get.
Echo that and say like keeping the focus on student learning as opposed to the technology for its own sake. So, like Unekwu said, like focusing on, why am I using this AI and what is it accomplishing for me, and constantly testing your assumptions on that. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love the structured approach. And in general, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. It's been invaluable. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of EdTalks Spotlight. And we hope you enjoyed learning about the transformative impact of AI in education with Dr. Steve Ritter and Unekwu-Ojo Shaibu. Be sure to catch up our next episode on YouTube, Spotify, for more insights and discussions on the latest innovations in educational technology. Until the next time.